Good day, Internet. This is DTNS Live for Thursday, March 13th, 2025. From Studio Animal House, I'm Sarah Lane.
From Columbus, Ohio, I'm Robb Dunewood.
And on this spooky Thursday the 13th, I'm the show's producer, Roger Chang.
Daily Tech News Show Live is made possible by its listeners thanks to all of you, including High-Tech Okie, Chris Zaragoza, Jim Hart, and our lifetime patron, Clint Williams.
Woohoo. Thank you to all our patrons, and welcome to everyone to DTNS Live, the show where we discuss the tech news to help us all understand it a little bit better. Whether it's raining where you are, whether it's snowing where you are, whether it's sunny as heck. How is everyone doing? Robb Dunewood, tap in.
Robb Dunewood is not complaining because it's the beginning, or, still the middle of March. I guess we're in the middle portions of March. And it's like 74, 75 degrees outside. So I'm as in the sunny, and I'm as happy as a lark.
Spring.
I actually might go do lawn work when we get done.
Well, we were all talking before the show, Joe, Roger, and I talking about California rain. And, I'm like, so much rain. Rob's like, how much rain exactly? Okay. Because I don't know. I don't know if that's that much rain. But yeah, we got a good dump in LA, which we need. So that's good.
It's relative to where you are.
Definitely. Yeah, galoshes season. That's what's going on in March in LA. All right. Well, Roger, do you have thoughts?
No, I don't know. I don't know if it's galoshes. It's definitely, you just can't wear.
Oh, it's galoshes.
It depends on the neighborhood. If you don't have good drainage, yeah.
Yeah. My neighborhood is full of puddles. So that's where we are, which is fun. I like galoshes. All right. We are here to talk about tech news. So let's get into it, starting with the quick hits.
Intel announced Lip-Bu Tan has been appointed as the new CEO. Tan previously served as CEO of Cadence Design Systems and was an Intel board member until last year, now taking over from the interim co-CEOs David Zisner and MJ Halthus. The duo assumed their roles in December after former CEO Patrick Gesslinger's ousting.
Food delivery startup Wonder has bought media company Tastemade for roughly $900 million. Tastemade was founded in 2012 and produces food, travel, and home-related videos and runs several free ad-supported streaming TV channels as well. The deal gives Wonder access to Tastemade's content studio, production resources, and ad infrastructure, which it plans to use to strengthen its brand and grow its audience.
WhatsApp is working on a message threading feature to make it easier to follow conversations. It will link replies on the original message in a dedicated view, reducing the need to scroll through chats. Spotted in the Android Beta 2.25.7.7 update, the feature is still in development and will be available in a future update. It's expected to work on individual chats, groups, communities, and channels, though channel replies are still being developed.
The Wall Street Journal sources say that the U.S. president's family has held talks about taking a stake in Binance.us. That is the American arm of the crypto exchange that pleaded guilty in 2023 to violating anti-money laundering laws. Binance's founder, Chang Zhao, served 4 months in prison for a related charge and has been pushing for a pardon by the Trump administration.
Meta will start testing its community notes feature in the U.S. on March 18th across Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, but notes won't publicly be visible during the testing period of the writing and rating system. This replaces Meta's fact-checking program, which the company says will be less prone to bias. About 200,000 people have signed up to contribute, though access is set to happen gradually and at random.
Microsoft announced Copilot for Gaming, an AI assistant for Xbox players. First available through the Xbox mobile app and acting as a second screen companion, offering gameplay tips, hero recommendations, and crafting guidance. In a demo, Copilot helped an Overwatch 2 player with strategy and advised a Minecraft player on crafting and locating materials. Early versions will roll out to Xbox insiders starting in April. Comcast signed a $3 billion deal with the International Olympic Committee, or IOC to retain U.S. broadcasting and streaming rights for the Olympics through 2036. We're going out quite a bit here. The deal includes the 2034 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City and the 2036 Summer Games. We don't know where that's going to end up yet, but, we should know sooner than later. Comcast provides technical and advertising support as part of the deal, including the Olympics broadcasting service and a new Olympic video player. It also boosts Comcast's role from media rights holder to actual strategic partner. NBC Universal has been the exclusive U.S. broadcaster of the Olympics for decades and most recently used to promote Peacock.
This sounds pretty cool, Sarah. So one of the things, and I think you mentioned this when we were talking in the green room about how just the last Olympics, the Summer Olympics, just this past summer in France, you were really able to watch what you wanted to watch, which is kind of different. It used to be that whatever NBC got and whatever NBC showed is what you watched, unless you were up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Whereas now you actually were able to, via streaming, via Peacock, via things on YouTube TV, you were actually able to see the content that you might have actually wanted to see, which I think was a positive thing and probably one of the reasons why Comcast signed this ginormous deal.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing with Comcast being like, all right, we're doing this. Over the summer, as you mentioned, Rob, when the Paris Olympics Summer Games were going on, I was watching via YouTube TV. Other people could watch other places, but YouTube TV did a very good job of being like, all right, what do you want to see? Tell me ahead of time. You want to watch, the javelin toss? You just, go ahead and click that one, and that will be part of what you watch when you're ready to watch it at whatever, time zone that you're in. In years past, the Olympics have struggled quite a bit with, the idea that we're not all in the same time zone. I mean, back in the day, it was just like, if you don't watch it, you don't watch it. But in our modern era, we were in sort of a weird holding period. I can remember, I don't remember what the Olympics were. It might have been Beijing, but it was the first time that you were starting to get some basically like, instead of just what the NBC feed fed you, you could, on your iPad get the gymnastics. Feed. Yeah. Like them just sort of like working out, getting ready for the stuff. And at this point, I feel like they've figured it out pretty well.
Yeah. Another part of this is that because the Olympics happen at different time zones all over the world. Sometimes they're even in different time zones for the host country, depending on the sports you're watching. So because of that, in the old days, you could watch things time lapsed and you didn't necessarily know who won the match. You didn't know who won the game. You didn't know who shot the best. You didn't know that until you actually watched it, even though you might have been watching it 6 or 7, 8, 10 hours after the time that it actually happened. With the internet, that's a lot harder to do. So I think that, as you said, what we saw with, the last Olympics, what we saw even going back to Beijing, where, they were showing you more, it just made for a better watching experience, because there are folks who will, this is coming on at 2 o'clock in the morning. If I can watch it at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll shift my time to get up and watch it so that I can see it happening in real time, as compared to having to catch a replay after the fact where I already know who won. When you already know the outcome of a game, it's a little harder to watch it, particularly if you didn't win and you were expecting to win.
100%. Yeah, I think we're all kind of used to the fact that, if you are online and if you're an online person, you're going to ruin things for yourself. That's just the way it goes, because people just don't, they don't respect the no spoilers rule. But with the Olympics in particular, I did feel like over the last, it was in July of 2024 where I was like, I can watch whatever I want. I mean, sure, I still have to get off the internet a little bit. Can't check X to figure out if Simone Biles won or not. But for the most part, I could see everything I wanted, and it seemed to be set up so much better than it had before.
I mean, as long as like they've worked out the whole thing where, I mean, in times past, like NBC would show you, or even on alternate channels, like just truncated versions of matches or
And they
meets
still
and
do
stuff.
that.
And I mean, part of it is just like being able to watch it from beginning to the end without like some people love Bob Costa and the commentary that that people provide during it, but sometimes you just want to watch it, like sans the punditry or whatever. You just want to see like, hey, this individual representing this nation and this sport, I get to watch it unfettered, uncolored, unfiltered.
Where we are technologically, just compared to 20 years ago, there's cameras on every single event. And not only are there cameras there, they can get the feed from those cameras to wherever they want to get it to relatively easily, compared to if you go back into the 90s and the 80s, to where, okay, we've got to put things on film. When do we want to broadcast this? You can literally show live feeds to anything from a phone. So the fact that, that Comcast is using these multi-million-dollar, camera setups, it's going to look really, really good. So I think that's one of the things that is allowing us to just kind of pick what we want to watch and watch it, because there's cameras everywhere and they can very easily get those feeds to us without having to literally have an entire production bus just for that one thing that you are watching. I like watching archery. Over the years, it has become increasingly easier to watch it simply because there's cameras everywhere, and you don't have to read what happened. You don't see still pictures of what happened. You can actually go and watch people shoot, which is what I think is really appealing for the Olympics. You get to see all these other sports that you don't normally get to see.
And you mentioned something pre-show, Rob, which I thought was very insightful. Is like you don't want to. It's in something like the Olympics. Sometimes you don't want a curated experience. You want the experience that comes out raw, because you want to be part of the moment, right? If an archery event is happening in real time and you just stayed up until 2 a.m. because it's on the other side of the world, you want to be there and feel and see that event instead of having a delay, having it filtered through a commentator. You just want to yeah, that's the actual moment. That's because that's what makes live events like the Olympics so exciting, right? Because it's very spontaneous. It's very like of the moment. And
yeah, and that's what didn't used to happen, right? It was like, if something happens at 2 a.m. and you live on the West Coast, as you and I do, Roger, it's like you just would get the wrap up. You wouldn't be able to get that feed. And now we have lots of other options to be able to get all the feeds we want, even if it's after the fact.
Yeah, and we were saying that it's really nice to be able to watch the live feed. But even for like you guys, if you're watching something that's already happened, the fact that you can actually go back and watch the entire match. So if you are able to stay off Twitter, stay off whatever threads, whatever platform, and not know who won, you could actually go watch the entire thing, because now you're just streaming it as compared to getting that curated feed. So I'm all for Olympics. I'm all for, watching as many of these different events as we possibly can. So hopefully, like I said, I think that NBC did a good job with the last Olympics, and hopefully they'll continue to do so for the next 10, 12 years.
Agreed. All right. So, Rob, switching gears a little bit here, Google has introduced Gemini with personalization. What is that exactly? And would we use this over other chatbots?
So Sarah, they actually have introduced and released Gemini with personalization. It's a new experimental feature designed to enhance user experience by leveraging personal data from Google's ecosystem. So what does that mean exactly? Gemini can now reference a user search history, and eventually other services like Google Photos and YouTube, and I would imagine some other things eventually as well, to deliver tailored responses. So let's say that you're looking for something like a restaurant recommendation. Gemini will actually consider recent food-related searches that you may have done before it gives you the list of places that you might want to go and join.
Like Sarah, I know you like sushi, so
exactly. And as I was, reading the story, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of agnostic when it comes to whichever chat bot that I use. I probably use Gemini the most just because I actually have a Google Workspace account and it's kind of included with that. So I'm paying for it, so I use it the most. But I really do use the other ones as well. I'm always in ChatGPT. I use Perplexity a lot lately. I actually really like Perplexity. And I think that Google and the other bot makers know that, hey, we need to figure out how to become sticky and get people to stay in our system so that we can make the money. And I think what Google is doing here by tying this into, your other systems that you're using or your other services that you're using from Google is making it a little bit more sticky. Now, this is all powered by the Gemini 2.0 flash thinking experimental model and is not turned on by default. So folks who are concerned about any security, if you don't turn it on, it's not going to be on for you. You have to turn it on. You also get the option to turn it off at any time that you would want to if you've turned it on. But once you do that, it will use the other services that you use within Google to help cater and help to steer the results that you get when you are doing your searches or when you're just using the LLMs for whatever work that you're doing. I am kind of not sure how I feel about this. It's like on one hand, Google already has all this information about me. I can turn this on. It's not like I'm giving them additional information. They already have the information about me. They're just now allowing that information to be used in an LLM. And if you follow the logic, you would think, well, by doing so, you're going to make that LLM much better for you. I do believe that by Google having information on me, that sometimes searching for stuff is a little easier, that sometimes looking at, various types of emails is a little easier because they know what my patterns are. They know what my habits are. But there are others who are going to say, no, they get it wrong all the time. So I'm not certain how I feel about this. I kind of want to probably test it out and just see what it does for me. And it gets me to thinking that this is what Apple is ultimately going to eventually do with Siri and with Apple Intelligence. Now, we know that that's extended out another year. It's going to be 2026 at the earliest before we see that. But Apple knows they absolutely have to nail that. I wonder what this is going to look like from a Google standpoint. Are they nailing it? Is it good? Is it useful? I don't think that Google would have the pushback that an Apple would if it doesn't work right out of the gate. But I do think that this is also something that Google does have to get right because they do own search. They do own photos. They do own email. They do want to make all these other services that they're using work very, very well. So I'm just interested and excited to actually see how it works myself.
I am hesitant, and because systems like this intersect multiple areas of concern, right? Privacy, data collection. They might already have the information, but as you use an LLM with that information, whether it's Google Photos, your Gmail, your search, or whatever, it can build a more comprehensive behavioral pattern of what you do. Okay, at 5 o'clock, Robb Dunewood likes this particular beverage because he's always looking online for this kind of, this early evening beverage or whatever. Like it could be innocuous, but it could also this kind of goes back to our discussion yesterday about having a sort of a digital footprint online. And the only way I think I would feel comfortable about turning this on is if the LLM resided locally on my machine, where I know that the data that it pulls, or at least the data that it crunches down,
it's designed for you without
having to leave. Without having to leave the sandbox of my machine. So I do not have to worry about, sure, Google could be a total angel on this, and this system could work great, but that would be my primary concern. The second one is sometimes what you want isn't what you really need, and I think this kind of reminds me a little bit of music catering services, whether it's Spotify, Pandora, whatever. You think you know what you like, but one of the things I've learned, one of the things I turned to over the past several years of listening to curated music based on my taste is I've resorted more heavily to radioparadise.com because I don't control it. It's just the people at the other end, and it's a nonprofit. They play whatever music that they want. And sometimes I will hear a song that I would have never guessed I would have enjoyed. It could be a folk tune. It could be a country tune. It could be a pop, or it could be hip hop or whatever. Something I would have never voluntarily, went for, but it presented it to me. And
my local radio station, same thing. It's like they're actually better at it than I would be.
And I'm wondering if this is one of those things where it's maybe not an echo chamber, but it puts you in a safe zone of things that, like, oh, Roger likes this kind of food. It's like, oh yeah, sometimes I would like to try something new, but I don't know where to begin. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's that's what worries me, is that you sort of kind of cocoon yourself based on your previous experiences instead of pushing outwards.
I mean, so much of the Google experience is a lot of this. So Google search, for example, it's like if I type in, like 3 letters, often I'm like, wow, that just auto completed exactly what I was about to say. Why? Because Google knows what I was about to say. Sometimes when I'm looking up stuff on a map, it's like, oh wow, there's the Winchell's Donuts that I was going to go to anyway, because Google knows that I like donuts. It for the most part, on the surface, it's fine. It's Google being like, hey, we're just trying to help you. And you're like, oh, cool. Yeah, that actually helped me. And in many instances, I think that is helpful. But like you said, Roger, there are times where you're like, no, I just want to do my own thing. I don't, you're pushing something at me that I'm actually not looking for right now, because all you know is my past behavior, not my future behavior.
Is it making predictions on your future behavior? I wonder if it's that savvy to be able to do that. And I also wonder, just pushing back a little bit, Roger. So if you turn this on, does Google get more metrics on you, or do they just use the metrics that they've already gotten?
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was actually asking the question. Do you think that if you turn this on, do you think Google is now collecting more information on you than they were if you didn't turn this on? Because my gut tells me that they still have all your search, they still have all your photos, they still have all the things you do in the LLM. They just haven't linked them together so that the LLM can make decisions based off the other data that it already has on you. So I'm wondering, is this a situation to where if you are in the ecosystem at all, if you're giving them any metrics on you at all, is this going to be one of those things where it's just more utilitarian? It's easier to use. It's giving you a better experience, but it's not necessarily collecting any more data on you than it already had. I don't know the answer to that. It's just a question.
And this is the thing. Everything is on scale, right? I'm not talking about like suddenly they're going to get a new treasure trove of insight into the Roger Chang experience, which is weird to say. But it could add a layer of confirmation. Oh, he does like Doritos, ranch Doritos, because he ordered it after Gemini suggested, hey, you want a bag of ranch flavored Doritos. They're little bits.
When was Gemini doing that for you?
Well, no, but if it's making personalizations and
Right.
like, hey, I want a snack.
Yeah,
right?
Google's like, we know you bought these before.
The more you use something, and I know I'm being a little maybe a tinfoil hat here, but say I have an Android phone, I have location turned on, I use Google Maps, it knows where I'm at, it knows that I went to the store, that hey, like maybe you should go down to the store and pick yourself up. If I'm saying like, hey, I'm a little peckish, what around me can I get? It's like you can try all these places. It has maybe enough just to build up, like, okay, if we recommend this sushi place to Sarah, she's 65% more likely to go there. They can then take that data and then they could say, hey, your customers are more likely to come to your sushi restaurant because our LLM recommends it. As we all know, Google made its fortune on ad search. Right? Why wouldn't they make their money on ad LLM, where they would just suggest, hey, you need a new car? You should check out this dealership, kind of pointing you in the direction. I'm not saying that Google is nefarious or malicious, but I mean, if I was thinking of how to make money off of this product, that's what I would do.
I mean, listen, if I am looking for a car right now, new Chrome tab, I type in, car near me type thing. Google is pretty good about being like, here are the cars that we think you might like, because they know, because we've been on Google for a really long time.
I want Jarvis right from Tony Stark's mind. That's what I want as my assistant. So I want, I'm kind of hungry and I have no idea what I want. And then my assistant says, well, you're over on this side of town and it's been like 5 weeks since you last had Frisch's chicken. Is that something you might think you might want? Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that. But now that you say it, that sounds kind of good. That's kind of what I want. And if this gives me that, then I'm kind of for it, but I'm with you as well, Roger. It's like, what are you doing with all this data? Do you have more signals on me now? If it's just that that you got confirmation bias, so I get it. It's like, I think it would be a cool tool if it works. I also think that it gives them the opportunity to advertise to me more.
I love the idea of Jarvis, but if we remember, Jarvis is locally housed at Stark or Avengers Tower, right? Or it's not online operated by a third party outside of Tony Stark's control. And I think that's for me, the crux of it. I have no problem with LLMs. I have no problem with generative AI. I want it local or even on a local server, so there is more control over how it processes the inputs
Well, and I think one of the other issues with this is, we all talk about this, talking about like, when is it too smart? When is it too pushy type thing? And there are folks out there who don't realize that that is happening. I think that's the bigger problem is, if my mom, for example, is like, well, I guess I'll have sushi again. I'm like, yeah, well, like, just remember that things that are being offered to you are not necessarily the things that you want, or they're the things that are a language model has decided you want more than you don't want, and that can change behavior.
It absolutely can. So, folks, what do you want to hear us talk about on the show? One way to let us know is in our subreddit. Submit stories and vote on them at reddit.com/r/Daily Tech News Show.
All right, Roger, you came across a story regarding the downsides of generative AI tools in misrepresenting Indigenous cultures at times.
Yeah, so there was a story posted in the conversation by John McCullen and Glenn Stasiak, lecturers at Murdoch University in Australia, who were highlighting the dangers, maybe not directly of generative AI tools, but rather the training data used to train them over a process, what they call cultural flattening. Cultural flattening is a process where a culture is made to appear more uniform and less diverse because the training data that's been used to train it hasn't been either well curated or inputted in a way that allows sort of separation. In other words, for example, if we used me as an example as a Chinese American, the system would automatically integrate the outputs of whether it's Chinese, Japanese, Korean, it's all the same. And so you would have a mishmash of cultural iconography and concepts that are actually separate, but you just kind of push them together and say, aha, this is your East Asian individual, all chopsticks, all coolie hats, all eating rice, which is not necessarily true, because if you actually look at the way that a lot of cultures are, there are similarities, yes, but they're not the same. And I think one of the worries about this is, especially with culturally marginalized and vulnerable populations, this can lead, because so many people use these tools and they say, I need a stock image of, say, an Aboriginal, Australian Aboriginal person. What you will get is a kind of a homogenized view of that person or that group or that culture, instead of having the nuance to say, like, hey, not all people in the British Isles, behave this way, because you're dealing with Scots, Welsh, English, Irish, Celt, rest, all together, they're not the same group. And especially because these tools are so widespread, there is a danger, or at least they feel there is a danger, that a lot of these cultures could just sort of be blunted down into a very simple kind of tropey example of what they actually are.
I think here in the United States, terms like diversity are not cool right now, depending on how you lean. But one of the reasons why it really helps when you have diverse groups of people working on these projects is that it is very easy that if you don't know anything about a culture, that you don't know that the marking is not a real marking. You don't know that there's a difference between, even though these two groups of people may only be separated by 15, 20 kilometers, you don't realize that there's completely different language spoke between them and that their cultural is very, very different. You just don't know those things. So it's not that you are intentionally not getting the right training data. You just don't know that you're not getting it. And then when it spits things out, you don't know that it's that it's culturally inappropriate. So I think that diversity could actually help with that by just making sure you've got people who that you're pulling this data from. You might actually have some of them working on a team to actually help you through that, or at least working with your team to help you through that. And I think the other part of it is that when you're talking about these small populations of people, that training data is expensive. So one of the reasons why a lot of these companies don't necessarily train as well on that type of content is because that kind of content is very expensive and they just don't have the budget to go and do it. So you basically spend less and you get worse outcomes because you're not putting the money in to get those very diverse sets of pictures that may have copyright on them that you have to spend more money for. So there's a lot of things that go into this, but it is quite easy for an LLM to completely homogenize an entire population of people simply because you didn't train the data in the right way.
And yeah, I mean, to go back to your example, Roger, but like Chinese, Korean, it's Vietnamese. I mean, very, very, very different cultures, right? And if an LLM is sort of like, oh, Asian, that isn't serving anybody. That is bad information. But why is that bad information happening? It's because the LLMs were not trained appropriately.
And unfortunately, on the level of scale, groups, countries that have a large population, that have a market that you want to access, you tend to be a little more cognizant and sensitive about those things because that's someone you want to sell to. But if you're a smaller group of people, you're not as marketable, right? You're not a group that you can make a lot of money from. You can make a lot of money selling things into China. Not so much when you're dealing with a tribe of people, maybe 500,000, 250,000, right? And so there's a scale where, yeah, money talks at that point, right? Because people like, well, I don't want to lose the Chinese market because they got billions of dollars to spend. This market, maybe I make a few hundred, but on the big scheme of things, not a financially prudent move to spend so much, as you were saying, Rob, resources on making sure that data set is legitimate or at least accurate. And it's weird because I think what happens with a lot of technology, and I'd actually talked to Andrea Jones-Roy about this on Behind the Data. We were talking to a guest. There's this concept of techno-chauvinism, where we kind of assume that technology will be the silver bullet that helps solve everything. And what that kind of leads people into is like, well, I suddenly don't need to care as much, right? I can put this on cruise control and lean back, and then it'll sort it out for me. And I think what's really important from this story is you need to be able to measure the output across multiple criteria, not just, yeah, that looks like a dog. It has 4 legs, a head, and a tail, and that's good enough.
Yeah,
there's certain things where we consider to be good enough doesn't cut it.
That's a really good way to put that. I think, yes, that the idea of sort of being like, oh, I can just sort of be a backseat person and let the AI do everything for me. Sometimes that works, right? Oftentimes it does not work, and we're still in early days of that. And to kind of just be like, let's just see what they come up with. Well, they're coming up with weird stuff.
I think it's safe to say that it's not even oftentimes it doesn't work. I would say that LLMs more times than not are wrong when you ask them to do certain types of things. So you have to be really, really careful with how we're using these things to make decisions. Well, the chatbot said that this was the truth, therefore it must be the truth. And it's like, no, we are seeing with data and metrics that are coming out literally weekly that these things are pretty efficient at telling us the wrong thing and being very, very assured of themselves when they're telling us the wrong thing. So we just got to be careful with it, because if you don't put enough good data in, you're definitely not going to get the results that you want out of it. And in this case here, you may not even know that you're not getting the results out because you didn't have the right information going into the system in the first place.
And I think that that's really important, is that I definitely do think their AI is a fundamental, society changing technology. But you also need to understand that what you're getting out is accurate, right? If you don't know math and you just ask an LLM or even machine learning a mathematical problem, and you take it spits out an answer, you just take and write it down on your paper, you call it a day. If you don't understand why that works, you have no idea of whether or not the answer you got is the correct answer, right? If you already know your addition, multiplication, division, quadratic equation, advanced algebra, pre-calculus, you have an understanding whether or not what you're looking at is accurate. But if you don't, you just sort of you're a little more susceptible to just kind of accepting what you get.
Yeah. Well, in this vein, OpenAI wants the U.S. government to establish a copyright strategy that allows AI models to be trained on copyrighted material under fair use. In a proposal for the Trump administration's AI action plan, OpenAI argued that fair use has been driven by AI innovation in the U.S. The company previously defended its practice of training models on publicly available data without consent, despite facing copyright infringement lawsuits. Obviously, the company wants things to change. The company warned that restricting AI training to public domain content would limit AI's ability to meet user needs. And I feel like this kind of goes back to our previous conversation, right? It's like, this is OpenAI saying, we need this stuff. If we don't have this stuff, we're going to get it wrong. However, fair use is something that a lot of creative professionals care very much about. And I don't know. What do you think, Rob?
I think that when it comes to fair use, I, as a human being, could go to the library. Let's say that I'm doing some research on podcasting, and I could go and I could get 5 books, 6 books, 10 books, 20 books, even if I have a lot of time, and read through the 20 books on podcasting. And then from that, formulate my own opinions, formulate my own ideas, and then write my book, not plagiarizing those 10 to 20 books that I've read, but ultimately formulating my own book off of that. And that would be considered fair use, as long as I'm, doing attribution and those kind of things. What I, as a human, can't do is go scan the internet for all things that have been written about podcasting in the history of man, and then use a computer with a server room the size of several football fields to then churn out content, piece after content, piece after content, piece after content piece. And you say, well, it's the same fair use. I don't know. I don't know that it is, because it's fair for me to go to the library and read a book. I don't know that it's fair for OpenAI to, for free, scan all books that have ever been written and then charge people on the back end to use the services that come from it. I don't know that is fair use. Now, I think that what I think doesn't matter. We're going to have to probably put this in front of of a judge and maybe eventually lawmakers to create law on how LLMs and how AI in general can use data. But I'm not really feeling OpenAI's stance on this, that we need this to help the people out. It's like, no, you need this to make more money, and you have more profit margin if you don't have to pay for it.
I mean, one of the ideas that's always been kicked around is like, fine, you want to use fair use on all these materials. That means all your outputs are now fair use that are generated. So any generative artwork, any generative literature, anything, ideas or whatever, that's fair use, and anyone can use it, regardless of whether or not they pay. And I think one of the things that really sticks in people's craws about this is the scale, right? You have, granted, OpenAI isn't a huge company, but it's a very well-moneyed, or at least invested in company. And so they have the financial resources to run their operation. If you're just a small-time, author that's written maybe 5 books, you feel like, wait a minute, I had maybe made maybe $100,000 of all this stuff I've written, over the course of my life for this publisher. Suddenly you get this company that literally is worth billions of dollars saying, hey, I get to use your stuff for fair use, and I'm going to train my models, deal with it. It seems sort of a mismatch in terms of who has the power, right? The company with a lot of money and resources, and remember, because they're treating all these works as sort of a monolithic entity, it's not. These are different people who've written things. These are different groups that have written things, that have published things with different intents in mind. You're suddenly just going to just sort of consume everything all at once and expect that it could be fair use. I don't know. There might need to be a situation where, like in Britain, you pay for every TV. You have to pay a regular TV license in order to watch TV. Maybe if generative AI models want to use a lot of this data, they just pay a flat fee for the number of materials they use. The more materials they use it, and they just pay it on an annual basis, as long as their AI model that is being run is using it. If something's deprecated, then they no longer have to pay because it's no longer in use.
When I think about, I don't know, what we do here on Daily Tech News Show, DTNS Live, it's like there are definitely times where it's like, is this fair use? Let's think about it before we go forward with a certain story in a certain way. The idea that, going back to your point, Rob, that fair use could just be like the whole internet, that does not speak to me as, oh, I'm being a journalist right now. No, it's I just now have a library of things that I now can use. Now, that's great on one hand. I mean, awesome, wealth of knowledge, right? But when it comes to, oh, am I sort of breaking the rules here? That is where it becomes a gray area.
Yeah, for me, it really comes down to the scale. What humans can do as far as fair use. I mean, there are some folks that literally read a book or two a week or more in some cases. But what a human can't do is read everything that has ever been written or printed, but LLMs can. So I just think that we're trying to apply copyright as copyright existed 100 years ago to things that we have just been able to do for the last few years. And I just don't know that works. And that's why I say that I believe that we need to, courts are definitely going to be involved here. But I think that we need to actually have our legislators go and look at this and say, hey, you know what, we're going to create some new laws for how we treat copyright when it comes to artificial intelligence as compared to people. I am of the mind that those two things, people and AI, to me, should be treated differently. And I don't think right now they are. And I think that what OpenAI is trying to say is that we want you to just treat us like people, even though we can do things that people could never do just because of capacity.
Well, and I think OpenAI's, whole stance is like the people are the ones that created these tools in the first place. So it's all people, right? But no, it really isn't. You could argue and you could agree that yes, it's all people at the end of the day, right? Like people created computers. People are the ones that did all of the stuff that we're dealing with today. But what the on the other side of it, I do think that fair use has to be broken apart in a different way.
Especially when there's a monetary gain from one entity over the other. And it's not it's not like they're earning $1.50, right? So it's an enormous sum of money, which then they turn around to make even more money. So it's scale, and it's the power dynamic, right? You're dealing with individuals who suddenly get caught up in a giant mall of processing.
Not a year ago, the CEO of OpenAI said to business leaders around the world, "It's like, yeah, if you give us like $7 trillion right fast, we could do some really, really cool things with artificial intelligence." So I do believe that OpenAI, although it isn't yet, it is very, very quickly trying to become a for-profit company, and you have to keep that in mind as well when you're talking about these kind of stories. It's like they want to get stuff for free that they ultimately, eventually, want to charge people for.
Yeah. And I think that's, we've seen it in other facets of industry, and I think people might, maybe rightly so, a little concerned about that.
A little bit, yeah.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. We are not concerned about our mailbag. It's fun every day, so let's check it out now.
So Tim wrote in, I believe, for a story that we covered yesterday in the Quick Hits. And Tim writes, TSMC is talking to Broadcom, is a sentence that strikes fear in my heart as one who's living through Broadcom's takeover of VMware and has seen what they did in the past to other companies. At least they're not talking to AT&T or Comcast.
Yeah, well, not yet anyway.
It's it'll be interesting. I mean, a lot of people are a little sour over what happened to VMware. But I mean, they're in talks with maybe producing Broadcom chips. I mean, we'll see. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to best increase the capacity for fabbing, because right now one of the constraints is there are very few fabs that can do the very high or very, very small, high-level processes that you need for AI chips as GPUs and CPUs. And so right now, it's like everyone's trying to find a silver bullet that helps relieve that pressure.
Also in the mailbag, Martin sent us his thoughts about our discussion yesterday about reducing their digital footprint online. Martin says, I joined Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube in the late 2000s. I was a teenager. I now do not like the person that I was at that point in my life. I posted some things that I'm embarrassed about and some that could be hurtful towards people. A few years ago, I went through my profiles, removed the majority of my posts, and they no longer reflect who I am or my current opinions. I also deleted many check-in posts, as now no one is going to care that I went to the cinema in 2012. I had downloaded copies of my data before deleting, so I have personal copies of my posts. These days, I rarely post to those platforms, says Martin. If I have something to share, it will usually be to Snapchat, Facebook stories, for their ephemeral nature. I used to use Be Real as well, but my friends stopped using it. I'm with you on that one, Martin.
I am very lucky, I believe, to be born right smack dab in the middle of Gen X, which means that I am old enough to have seen all the stuff on the internet that's really, really cool, including the creation of social media. And I'm also young enough to have used it and really played around with it and liked it, but at the same time had enough common sense not to post everything about my life that was going to be archived potentially forever for the world to see. And I remember talking to my kids, it's like, you don't just because it happened doesn't mean you need to put it on social media. Not everybody needs to hear it. Just because you thought this doesn't mean you need to put it on social media. That can come back and haunt you. So, I'm with Martin on this. I do think that folks might want to do a inventory of some of the things they might have said 15, 20 years ago, and maybe it might be time to pull some of that stuff now.
And there's definitely this whole thing of like you growing up, right? When you're a teen, you maybe wrongly believe that everyone's entitled to hear you think, to your thoughts, even if they don't want to hear it, because that's sort of the mode you're in. But as you get older, you believe sometimes discretion is a better part of valor. In this case, just not posting stuff willy-nilly. I think, for the longest time, social media was sort of seen as this expressive outlet where you could be your true self. But then you realize sometimes maybe your true self isn't the self that you really want everyone to see, because maybe it's not the greatest part of you. And I think maybe this is part of that learning curve where people previous generations didn't understand, and they were literally posting everything they did, which on hindsight wasn't such a smart idea. Maybe with time, society will reach a happy medium, but I think 20 years in, 25 years in, and I still see questionable material posted by 50-year-old people. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm one of those folks that I preach to young people all the time. Just because you think it doesn't mean you need to say it for the world to see. And I often get hit back with, well, it's free speech. It's my First Amendment right to put whatever I want to put out there. And it's like, that is true. Yeah. But I always say this. Freedom of speech does not come without freedom from consequences. If the law, if the government is not locking you up because of what you said, that's cool. But that doesn't mean that a company can't react adversely to what you said and say, hey, we really don't want to be associated with you anymore because you said these things on your social media. And people think, well, what about my free speech? It's like, you were free to say it. The company is also free to terminate you because they don't like what you said.
And it's not even companies. It's your friends, your family. Yeah. It's like, oh,
you're right.
I didn't realize you thought like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, when Twitter launched, I was 29 years old. So, I wasn't a child, certainly not. But I was like, "Woo, this is fun. We just talk about everything, right?" That's Twitter. Well, no. Turns out that can come back to haunt you. Not that I really had to delete anything, but I mean, there are definitely a lot of things that I had posted in the past, not even on, just social media in general, just the internet in general, where I'm like, cringe, oh gosh, Sarah was having a day, that kind of thing. It is a good reminder to just be like, do you really want the world to have this? Because once you put it out there, they have it forever. Even if you delete it, it can be screenshotted. It does not go away. You put it out there, it's out there forever.
Once you hit send, that's exactly what happens. Mm-hmm. It's gone. It's there forever. So remember, you can send in your comments to feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com.
And we'll have it forever. But, we like your comments, so please keep them coming. All right, at dtns.showbot.tv, people have been submitting show title suggestions. Rob, what do we got?
So it looks like we've got a fair amount of submissions this way. So I'm just looking at the, at the old page here. We'll start at the top. Google Knows What You Want to Say by Larry in Atlanta. We have The Roger Chang Experience by Saray TW. 2036 Olympics bot, site unknown. What is that? G. James B. Olympic spoilers. That's also by G. James B. Welcome to the Roger Experience again by GPEG84. Cool tool if it works by Zoe Brings Bacon. AI Monolithic Minority Mistakes by C-Spawn. Sarah, what did we decide to go with?
We went with Zoe Brings Bacon's Gemini Responds Like You.
Yeah.
Which Google hopes is the case.
That's And if it doesn't, maybe it'd be a better product. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm not one to tell a multi-billion-dollar company how to run things.
I will be the guinea pig. I'm gonna turn it on and test it, and I'll report back what I think.
Thanks everybody for submitting and voting. Good stuff as always. Roger, we love everyone who supports us on the show. Did we get any more support today?
Yeah, we got some on the Twitch. We got Zoe Brings Bacon, who's always awesome, cheering us on with bits, and Bobby Fundy Jr., who followed us earlier this morning. Thank you, one and all. No raises today, but you know what? The support we get from our patrons is amazing. You guys often replied to our posts. You give us great comments, great insight, and of course, this the financial support is awesome as well. Everything is great. I love it. Actually, the titles are one title I just wanted to shout out is from Stray TW. It's Me Today is Not Me Tomorrow, which is very true, especially when you're talking about things you post from 20 years ago, thinking that everyone wants to know what you had for lunch.
I mean, literally tomorrow, I'm going to be like, I hated Thursday, Sarah. I'm not doing that again.
And although people are generally pretty forgiving. Forgiveness is a thing that a lot of people, believe in. Not so much when it comes to the internet. If you said something 36 years ago and it's on the internet and people don't like it, they're going to remind you today that they didn't like it, regardless of who you may have become since then.
There's a for some reason when you come on the internet, there's a license to sort of be. You can never make a mistake on the internet. You will forever be trolled for whatever mistake you've done. You can never be right about something because people will think that you're a little pompous. I mean, there's all these things about humanity that are writ large in the internet because there's no moderator really outside of maybe, Reddit or what used to be on Meta's platforms. But I think with time we'll grow and learn and adjust, maybe. I don't know. It might be. There's
a difference between being like, oh, I said that really horrible thing back then, and I don't take it back. I'm just not saying it now, right? I mean, so there's that, and then there's the other, like, I was just young. I don't know. I had a bad day. There are a lot of reasons why people are like, oh, I'm getting dragged. And sometimes it's warranted. And sometimes you're like, give them a break.
One of the things I've noticed is that in face-to-face conversations, people learn to filter their thoughts into a far more acceptable statement than what. Yeah,
because you have to look somebody in the eye.
Yeah. So maybe we just need to put eyes on the top of our monitor or devices that constantly stare at us. Yes. So when we put that anger, and this is the thing, goes with emails. I learned this about emails. Never write an angry social media post.
Never.
You will regret it. I guarantee you.
So here's an idea for a new LLM. How about a chat bot that before I post on social media, I type it into the chat bot and the chat bot tells me, here's how people will probably perceive this based off of the information that we have about everything that's ever been written 12 years from today.
Not a bad idea.
You know what? I had a very similar thought because a while ago, 12 years ago, a colleague and I were kicking around. It's like what the internet needs is like that 5-second space that you have in broadcast, like so you could press down the beep over any sort of expletive. If the LLMs could be that, like instead of you typing something directly into X or into Facebook or Instagram, it goes into the LLM and the LLM decides based on things that you've already said. Like I want to make sure I don't I don't anger people, I don't misstate the wrong thing, and it'll just like, wait a minute, I'm going to process this, gives you maybe an acceptable post, or it just says, maybe do this in 12 hours later when you feel better.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
I was just going to say, I'm for it. That's all. That was just, I'm for that. Help me help myself.
Also for it. 100%. For those of you who like Apple products, or maybe just, I don't know, even if you don't, you're kind of interested in what Apple is doing. Eileen Rivera and I do Apple Vision Show every week to talk about exactly whether Apple's vision matches with what we want. Are we thinking things are good? Are we thinking things are bad? What's going on with Apple? What's happening with Siri intelligence? And et cetera, et cetera. Get subscribed now at applevisionshow.com. And for everybody who's watching live or listening, we are doing the show today, right after we end DTNS Live. But just a reminder, you can watch us live here on DTNS Live at Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 2000 UTC. You can find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live. And we're back doing it all again tomorrow. Rob, Tom, and I are going to wonder at Len Peralta's artwork, as we always do. Talk to you then.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.